Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature successful business leaders, authors, top law firms, green energy companies, and more. Today, we're joined by former leadership coach to IBM's top executives, head of organization development at Honeywell, fellow with McKinsey's Change Center, and the CEO of Holzman Leadership, Todd Holzman. Todd, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt. Pleasure to be here.
It's great having you. Before we get too far in, a very quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until it's too late and the hacker's already done damage. A hacker's job is to bypass your security, so companies need a way of knowing when someone's gotten past their security. That's where CyberLink's intrusion detection comes in. With our 24/7 security operations center, we use a combination of AI and cybersecurity technicians to see when a hacker has successfully bypassed your security. So if a bad guy gets past your security, we'll find him right away and kick him out. Find out more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. Todd, so for those who are not familiar, can you tell us about Holzman Leadership?
Okay. So, from the outside looking in, we are a traditional leadership development firm. We do executive coaching, team coaching, leadership programs, and actually have developed a specialism of all things training pharma sales forces and their managers. But the red thread that cuts across it, and we have a global faculty of, 13 people now, more than half of whom are in the UK and Europe, and the rest are here in the States, and I'm here too. I don't know why I'm looking outside to verify where I am in the world. Apparently, I live in Manhattan. But the red thread that cuts across everything that we do is one thing. We're always trying to inspire and equip people to tell the truth.
Interesting.
And we've turned it so that people can express the truth of what they think and kind of live to talk about it.
Yeah.
So that's the essence of our firm, and that's what I've dedicated my life to for now 30 years.
Fascinating. Well, I tell
30
you,
years. Yeah.
I think there's, when you think of a kind of traditional leadership, I think a lot of things come to mind, but one that probably doesn't is inspiring people to tell the truth. So I'm guessing was there an aha moment or some sort of point where you're like, you know what, all of this boils down to the truth. Like that's where this all starts. How did the truth come into that?
How did I learn the truth about what I've been doing? That's a great question. It's funny when you have these interviews. I may say different things when I talk to different people, and they're all true. And what you don't want to do is just give the same boring robotic answer, press play. But there's something about our prep call that we talked about, and that's making me maybe answer the question slightly differently. So I'll give two answers. One is just realizing how bad at it that I was. And two, then somebody recently put words to what I've been doing and explained to me that's what I've been teaching. This is exactly what I've been teaching people. And I didn't, until he said it, have the courage to say, this is what I've been doing. Huh. So that's the truth. So the bad at it bit started when I was a kid. And I have these different people have these their origin stories for when they kind of find their life's work. I mean, mine probably started 7 years old, at my grandparents' 35th wedding anniversary party. And then we come back to the house with my parents and my grandparents and my mom, we called her Nana, my grandma. My Nana asked me, so how did you like the party? And I said to her, I didn't like it at all. And she says, well, why? And I said, well, because you kept calling Papa an idiot all night. I don't think you love him. And my Nana was cool with it, but my mom, not so cool with it, and she grabs me by the arm, or she grabbed me, sure, I don't remember. I just remember being yanked to the other room. She says, you can't talk to your Nana that way. I'm like, but you and Dad always told me to be honest. And she's like, not that honest, and you just kind of, and so I carried that with me for, I think, a long time. Because especially my father, really pushed on me, be honest, tell the truth, don't lie. I mean, like almost like brainwashing me.
Yeah.
Be honest, tell the truth, don't lie. And so I always felt this strong, almost compulsion to be honest and say what I thought. But then, like more often than not, or maybe almost always when I did, it didn't go well. But if I didn't feel well. So I was constantly for years felt in this horrible honesty dilemma. And then I go to Columbia where I did my first master's degree. And then I discovered, first of all, I realized how bad at it I was because of like this problem I had as a kid. I took all kinds of communication courses, interpersonal skill courses, influence, negotiations, mediation, conflict resolution, public speaking, everything. So I thought I was like quite the communications expert, but I still had trouble with honesty. When I was honest, it didn't go well. When I wasn't honest, I felt horribly. And then at Columbia, I kind of had a revelation, and I realized the things that I was doing, which were really ineffective. But what was more disturbing about it is that I realized I was behaving in ways that were also counter to my own values. So I really believed in the importance of listening. And like Stephen Covey, I was a huge Covey fan, seek first, understand before being understood. My favorite chapter. I could give you the greatest lecture on how to listen, right? Which is funny. But could I listen well? No. So it's like there was this gap between, not only did I have like just a gaping competence gap, with being honest, but also I found myself behaving in ways that stood in contradiction with how I believed I behaved and even wanted to. Mm-hmm. But so I when I went there, this was a horrible experience going through this class that I went through. Not only am I incompetent, but I'm a hypocrite. That's awesome.
Yes.
But I understood why, which was helpful, because when I realized I couldn't behave according to, say, like Stephen Covey's dictums, which I really wanted to, you kind of punish yourself for it. Like, what's wrong with me? I just need to try harder, need to buckle down, read that chapter again, and nothing would work. And then I discovered the work of this amazing guy named Chris Argyris. Chris Argyris he's like I call him the Einstein of the social sciences. The guy wrote 30 books, 150 articles, received 14 honorary doctorates for his massive contributions to multiple fields. And I discovered his research. And it turns out that whenever we feel like the conversation is going to be threatening or embarrassing, or whenever there's a level of complexity in the conversation where we start to feel in over our heads, this overprotective program kicks in that really renders us ineffective, or makes us employ really suboptimal strategies when we really need to be honest with one another. But also blocks us from acting according to our higher principles. So, and the short, he called it very sexually Model 1, which is why nobody ever heard of it. But basically, it's an overprotective program that drives you to try to get what you want and to avoid any discomfort in the process. So I'm trying to get what I want, and I want to keep things comfortable, but I really believe in like curiosity. I really believe in courage. But if I'm trying to get what I want, what does that do to my curiosity? Yeah. If I'm really kind of trying to keep myself and you comfortable, what does that do to my courage? Right. So it's like I discovered that we're all kind of divided within ourselves. We have these higher natures that we believe and want to aspire to, but then we have this other aspect of our nature, which is profoundly overprotective. And then once I I realized that. I also realized this was a universal phenomenon. It's seemingly affecting all people in the world. And let me see if I could do something to fix it.
Yeah.
And so that was 1994, three, something somewhere there. And since then I dedicated myself to helping people overcome this overprotective program and make them really good at candor, so they can express the truth of what they think in ways that people appreciate and don't get all defensive about, and that actually enables them to make a much greater impact than that's needed and that would otherwise be possible.
Well, and I think that's so interesting because I think that everybody, if they're being honest with themselves, struggle with that. You know, the problem of honesty, as you kind of walked us through your history with honesty. And I think that's really helpful because everybody's been there, right? And you're like, well, how do you say it without being a jerk, right? You're just going to hurt their feelings if you're, brutally,
Right.
if you're brutally honest.
Right.
Okay. But how can you be compassionately, honest, right? How can you say what needs to be said in a way that somebody hears it and you're still being honest to your true thought, right? Your true feelings or your opinion on something, and then taking the other person's, I suppose, perspective or feelings into account when you do it. I think everybody's grappled with that. And I think that, in my experience, most people have not probably mastered that. I think they've run from it. I think they've had lots of issues and challenges with it. And you don't find a lot of people who are really good at that level of candor. So I'd love to kind of dive in there and explore kind of the approach that you take with people, and some of the principles that you have when it comes to this, well, as you said, candor. So yeah,
Sure.
please.
Yeah, go ahead. No, and I will say, you know, that was very therapeutic to tell that story. I guess, Dr. Matt, thank you for the opportunity. We have the soothing background. It's all very I feel like I should be on a couch here. What did your mom do to you that made you think about candor? So that was cool. My second answer to your question was, I also said I didn't have the courage to say this is what I've been doing. And the reason I wanted to come back to it is because I want to give a shout out to this great guy named Ed Jenkins, who was a British guy living in the UK. He was kind of a franchise lead for one of our big pharma clients. He's moved on to a different client at this point. And we did this pilot, and because this pharma was a kind of a new client for us, and we were hoping we could do more good there. And the pilot went great, right? Like the salespeople, they increased their numbers. The managers were having better relationships with their salespeople, yada, yada, yada. I was like, oh, awesome. So, but, I don't always know why things work well, and I'm constantly curious because I'm trying to, my faculty and I are constantly trying to improve our craft, because this is a skill.
Yeah.
And this is part of the big message. It's not just about courage. And I think we need to get off courage a little bit, but I'll come back to that. Because we've made this whole candor thing too radical. It's too macho,
Radical
for my taste. But so I remember talking to Ed. It's like things went fabulously. Okay, we've got all the data, great. But why did it work? Like, because he was kind of two levels up from the salespeople, I think. And he says, well, because what you taught me and us, whether it was the salespeople or us managing the salespeople, was to treat every conversation with each other as a collaborative search for the truth on behalf of making things better. And he said it was a huge change in his frame around these things, because he always saw these conversations, whether he's talking to a colleague, a customer, his own people, it's like, I've got to win the conversation, right? I got to get what I want out of the conversation, as opposed to forget the consequences, man. Forget your goals. Your goal is to do as much good through this conversation as possible. And the way to do that is through an earnest pursuit of what's true. And that means you got to express the truth of what you think, but not in order to convince people that you're right.
Right.
But as a piece of the puzzle, so with other people you could figure out what's true. And he's like, it just, that was, and before, honestly, Matt, before he said it that way,
yeah,
I couldn't put words to it. And so when people ask me what candor is, I finally have a definition. And by the way, him saying that to me, became like my North Star for like the last 2 years. It's like, oh, treating every conversation as a collaborative search for the truth in order to make things better. That's it. I'm like, finally, after 30 years, I know what I'm doing. And it took somebody that I was developing to teach me what I'm actually doing in this life.
Well, I think that's so fun because you find that in all kinds of areas where, whether it's a software a platform, right? A software platform where they develop it and you have this idea that, hey, this is what it's going to do. And people take it in an entirely different direction. And if you go with it, then it becomes these Facebooks, these Googles, these things, these Twitters,
Really?
X, these platforms.
So they don't know exactly what they're doing when they start?
No, not at all. In fact, they start with one idea and it ends up morphing into it. And so it's this funny thing where you start, and you hear it all the time. Steve Jobs is kind of known for saying that if he had to know everything that it took, to do it, right, to be where, to make Apple what it is today, he never would have started. A lot of companies, there's just no way. Facebook, and not to use that example too many times, but same deal. There's no way that that these founders could have known all this stuff. They could have started with that end in mind. It ends up morphing, and you've got to have the kind of the courage, but the flexibility to hear what the other people. So in your case, you taught this person and their team these ideas. They then take it, and then their execution of it and their understanding of it, when relayed back to you, is this light bulb moment. It's like, yeah, that's it. That's so great. And so it really becomes this collaborative thing that wasn't intended to be collaborative, but because you had that flexibility and you went back and asked, hey, so how does it, and you actually had that conversation, then you get that experience. But you had the flexibility to do it, just like every great platform, any successful thing. There's not one that I can think of that started out where it was really like, that's how we do it.
Because the love of my life, my partner, Olga Zharanova, she has created this amazing reality based sitcom.
Oh, cool.
And unfortunately, I'm in it. And I'm not here to promote this thing, but it's to the point. And it now suddenly it's on Tubi, which is like, I didn't know anything about Tubi, but it's apparently like the largest free streaming service in the world.
Yeah, it's huge.
And we were at CBS Studios just yesterday, and there's a guy there, is kind of a famous showrunner, who's helping her, like, how do you pitch the project in a way. And we were talking in the cab home. It's like, and we were both saying, it's like, it's been 3 years and you're only now figuring out what the show's about. And that was the nature. So she started with this instinct to create something, more of a feeling, and also like a compulsion. Excuse me. And then, but if you ask her what the show was about, she couldn't tell you. She couldn't tell you. She couldn't tell you. It's like the nature of the creative process. And now she's got this cool opening one-liner. I'll just share it. We'll get back to the task, which said, well, imagine if Larry David had a one-night stand with the Kardashians. This show would be their love child. Like, where'd you go with that?
That's awesome.
It's kind of true, because
awesome.
she's kind of Larry David-ish. Yeah. And it's like, it's just like, wow. And I just saw her in the practice pitch meeting the other day, and so interesting and fascinating. And she was amazing. And then there's something about, like, when it all comes together, so I know you want to talk about principles and all that, but
no,
we're talking about them implicitly a little bit. Yeah.
I want to add one more example to
Please,
go along with exactly what you said with how she started that without that end in mind. Joe Rogan
Yes.
was the exact same thing with his podcast.
He was doing MMA. He just wanted to talk about MMA with his buddies because he loves Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That was it.
Yep. And now, $100 million later and everything, come on, forget about it. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I mean, I admire him tremendously. He's just such a cool guy. Oh,
Yep.
Yeah. Great. Okay.
But you're right. So getting back to those principles of how do you then, and you can see it, right? As people start implementing these kinds of ideas. I think here's what fascinates me and excites me really about what you said about it being about the truth is it goes so deep.
And because you're trying to do good, these things have to be connected. I'm sorry to interrupt you, because
100%.
sometimes candor can be weaponized. Because now it's all about, I got my truth. I'm just going to be real. And I'm going to say everything I think and feel. And it's it's really self-aggrandizing vanity. And
100%.
that is not what I'm pushing. So, okay, yes.
No,
please,
and then you take that principle right there, not to divert off, but you take that same principle there, that if you apply that to any organization, any mission where you really get down to doing good. I mean, we do IT and cybersecurity. If what excited us wasn't helping people and it wasn't protecting their companies and it was just money, we'd be an entirely different organization that we wouldn't be able to retain our clients, let alone our own employees. But because we have this great mission, it gives purpose. You're spending all this time working at some company. It's so much better when there's an actual mission with purpose. You're trying to do something good. So even in communication, when you boil it down to that, what I love about that you've gone with truth and communication is I think it permeates even into your thoughts and your perspective on yourself, because you got to be honest with yourself if you're going to be honest. And I think a lot of people struggle with that too, because it's easy to be like, well, this is just the thought I had and just spitting that out. But are you actually being honest with yourself about why you had that thought, why you had that? And I love that you brought in this whole, well, you got to work collaboratively to find the truth, because that'll help you also do that. But you've got to be looking internally and being honest with yourself. Oh, was I just being defensive? Am I doing this because I want to look good and because I want to win the conversation, because whatever it might be, right? Am I seeing the situation accurately? And so that honesty goes so deep. I think it's fascinating.
So I love what you're saying there. It reminds me of a mentor of mine who said, I thought something that was really brilliant. I still do. Just you're reminding me of it. Says you can't have an honest conversation with anyone unless you could first have one with yourself. Yes. I was like, dude, that's awesome.
It really is.
And in the you're getting all this out of me, Dr. Matt. So every morning I have like a little journal that I kind of write in. Mm-hmm. I don't do it every morning. You can call it some type of whatever, but you call it a reflection, you call it a prayer. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And my reflection and prayer goes something like, dear, insert your preferred spiritual mystical being. What good shall we do in the world today? And what do I need to clear out so I can hear the truth?
Nice.
And there's a lot of bullshit in my head that I got to get out, complaints, fears, stuff, anger, whatever it is, Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm telling you this is because what emerged kind of, you don't know where these things come from, but what emerged for me this morning was, what's the conversation you need to be having that you're not? With your partner, your kids, with your friends, with your parents, members of your family, with your manager, with your colleagues, with the people who report into you, with your customers. I think kind of, you said something earlier that connected to this, right? Like most of us avoid these things. That wasn't exact words that you use. It was a sentiment, I think. And I was like, I think the question that people need to, and myself included, we need to ask ourselves all the time. It's like, what's the conversation we need to be having? And I think if you ask yourself that question, you're going to get an answer. You're probably not going to like the answer.
Yeah.
And then it occurred to me, there are certain conversations, Matt, that certain certain things may bother you that don't bother me,
Right.
and vice versa. But it occurred to me this morning is maybe they bother you for a reason,
Mhm.
because you're the person who's uniquely suited to actually address it,
Right.
talk about it. And maybe that's what's calling you. And then the question is are you gonna answer the call or walk away? Now, I'm not a biblical scholar and I don't have any religious training and I wasn't brought up religious. But I do know about the story of Jonah. And when he did answer the call, apparently, according to the story, God put him in the bottom of the ocean in, the belly of a whale,
Mhm.
right? You saw the modern version of that in Pinocchio, right? By the way, and I'm just biting off of Jordan Peterson when I say all that, because he's been a huge inspiration to me. And then what's interesting is, you know, but then why are you being called to have that conversation? And I don't think we know. And that's the journey to figure out why. Because it might be, there's some good you can do. And we don't do anything unless we're bothered. So it's bothering you maybe for a reason, because human beings, we ain't going to wake up to do something unless it's bugging us or there's some emotion. Because without, what's the kind of corny phrase? Like, you're not going to get in motion unless you have emotion. So I kind of believe that, right? I think Kristen Hartnagel at Brand Builders Group said something like that to me, or Rory Vaden. It's like, those guys are brilliant. Anyways, and so I think that's true. But it doesn't mean you necessarily have to have the conversation. It could be you're just being a little too spoiled and maybe something's bothering you. And that is more about you than about the situation. But whatever is going to come out of it, that's good that you know that.
That's right.
Because maybe you need to get over complaining about something, because maybe something is your fault and you need to take more responsibility. But maybe there's an opportunity to make a difference here to the people around you, to your customers, to improving some kind of process in your organization, and that you're annoyed by it because you're being called to deal with it. So you're going to step up or not? And that never really occurred to me until this morning. Like, that's your cross to bear.
Yeah.
So do you get take it up or not? And it might be your joy, because, like, in order to have that conversation, first of all, it may take courage, and then suddenly you start to realize you had more courage than you realized. But also, you're turning yourself into a more courageous person by virtue of acting more courageously.
Yep.
Peter Senge, the guy who wrote The Fifth Discipline, said, act yourself into a new way of being, as opposed to sit on a mountaintop somewhere, have the revelation, then finally, when you're moved, take action. It goes act, and the emotions will follow.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that a lot. And then also, maybe when you express the truth of what you think, without trying to get what you want from the conversation, maybe you'll learn something. Maybe you'll learn that the truth of the situation is bigger than you thought, but you only learn that because you put your piece in the puzzle, and other people, because you've been so courageous and clear and direct with your view on something, feel compelled to do the same, because honesty has a way of begetting honesty. I mean, the truth has a certain ring to it.
Right.
And that when you're around it, you feel likewise compelled. So maybe you'll have a better understanding of what reality is, by the way, or maybe you'll realize, what the hell you're talking about. And that would also be great.
Right.
To be corrected.
Yep.
That's why I think on a personal development level, it's such an important thing to express, to lean in the conversations that you need to have. Now, the question becomes, is how do you have it? And this is where I think Jordan Peterson, whom I so much admire, right? I'm not sure he and I part ways here. But at least I'm at least going to talk about something he doesn't talk about.
Okay.
Because his whole thing is tell the truth and don't sweat the consequences. Not exactly, but he's like, you have to act with the faith that the best thing that could happen will come from that, even if it doesn't feel like
Okay.
it in the short term. And I think
Okay.
that faith is tremendously important. And it bolsters me in my work with my clients because they can fire me and they can fire my colleagues easily because we're just consultants, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also, maybe we could find a way to do it which reduces the probability of a bad outcome for ourselves or doesn't hurt other people. And so that's why I've really focused. I'm not only trying to inspire people to do it, but also I've tried to figure out like what does good look like under real life pressure, and forget theoretically what good looks like. What does it look like in the real world when you actually step out into the conversation? And that's what I've been trying to explore for like 30 years. And I had a lot of ideas about what would work. Half of them didn't work. I had a lot of thoughts about what wouldn't work. Those things would work. And when you develop well over 30,000 people, and helping them lean into competently the conversations they need to have up, down, across, and outside their organization, you learn a lot about what works and what doesn't. And so that's, I think, one of the things that my colleagues and I can carve out as our unique contribution to this space is we've actually turned it into a learnable skill with clear strategies you should employ and things you should definitely not employ or use very little or only at your own peril.
That's fantastic. Well, let me ask you, if let's say I'm kind of curious how this plays out in, like, I get it. If you take leadership training for your team, and it's obvious that is going to be, there's going to be basically a seismic shift in how that team and organization works when they start communicating and thinking in those terms. I think that's very obvious. And I think that it's fantastic. And I love that. So I'm kind of curious, those people who go through that training with you, they pick up those skills and they're like, okay, I've got these newfound truth seeking skills. What happens when they have a conversation with somebody who isn't, who hasn't gone through the training, right? So maybe they go home and they're talking with their spouse,
which is going to be almost all the time.
All the time. So I'm kind of curious, is it one of those things that people find that it encourages others there, instead of it being, as it's so often, a kind of a win-lose situation? People are trying to have a conversation just so they can make their points to be right, and have the other and the whole country seems to become very polarized.
That's right.
That I'm right, you're wrong. If you don't agree with me, you're a dirtbag. And I think it's insanity. And I think we've come so far from where we were 30, 40 years ago, where people, enjoyed and encouraged, discourse and disagreement, to say, oh, well, let's agree to this. I don't agree with you, but I love hearing your points. I see where you're coming from. I still don't agree with that, but I'm not demonizing you. So I'm kind of curious, when you have those conversations now, or if you've heard, back from people who now employ this new perspective, when they go and they have a conversation with their wife, is it like transformational? Like, holy crap, the arguments kind of dissipated. They softened, and now we work on, finding solutions instead of just kind of fighting, or whatever it might be. Does it transcend outside of the organization into people's personal lives in a positive way like that?
Oh, I always jokingly say, so if you're going to use this at home, that's the advanced course. But for 1995, yes, for sure. Although I'm not spending a lot of time, I'm spending some time on working with people on their conversations outside of work.
Mm.
And there I see it translating. There's no difference in terms of the skill set and the things that kind of will hurt you. So, as an example, so let me give you a negative example first.
Oh, cool.
Because I do want to emphasize the consequences of avoiding this call to honesty. So one of my coaches, I've got a lot of coaches. I need a lot of help, Matt. And you know, and she was telling me a story about her mom. And the story went something like this: so her father passed away, and her mother had been divorced from him for, let's say, 30 years or so. And somewhere soon after he died, her mother confides in her and says, he was the love of my life. And I divorced him. And I only now realize that I had all these concerns and complaints about him, but I never told him. And I divorced him. And I squandered having 30 years with the love of my life because I didn't have the conversation. And I was like, it's like, okay, I need to breathe. That's very heartbreaking, and so, I have prepared Olga, of course, to have conversations with that she knew were going to be difficult. See, Olga, she hates anything that's phony. Any phoniness, she hates it. And she wanted to have a conversation with her family member that she knew was going to be difficult, and I prepared her for it, and the conversation went great. And then her family member said to her, so I can tell Todd prepared you for this conversation, right? I was like, what do you mean? So there's something about what we don't realize is that part of the reason that people are so difficult and unreasonable is because of us. So I'll give you an example. So, yeah, no, okay, here. There's so many examples. So,
yeah.
So I was talking to a lawyer the other day, kind of a couple of rungs before the general counsel at this large company, and it's in the context of my coaching some important team, and she's basically trying to bring to this group's attention that they're not doing enough about something, and to explain to them what the risks are of it. Okay, and she shares and she's, I would say, frustrated with her lack of impact in those conversations. She feels that people are basically dismissing her arguments, right? It's like, okay, I understand. And she says, in part, sometimes I think it's because you also have this gender thing, right? They're more likely to dismiss what I'm going to say because I'm a woman. Fine. So then when I ask her, so tell me the argument, tell me what your reasoning is for why they should pay more attention to this, and what are the potential consequences. Just lay it out for me. Imagine we had a couple of beers, fine. Just what's the truth of this thing? She tells me. I'm like, wow. First of all, that reasoning is very strong, very clear, very compelling, and damn, you're articulate. Like, wow, what an impressive person, And then I have this little tool that this guy, Chris Arger's invented that I mentioned earlier, that I converted into a developmental tool for leaders and people that he originally used as a research tool. And you just get people to write down, like, here's what I actually said to the best of my memory. And it can't be like a characterization of what you said. Like, I was honest, they were a bunch of defensive assholes. No, it has to be, to the best of my memory, here's what I said and here's what they said. And I don't care if they lie. I don't care if they forget. It doesn't matter. Because it turns out the place where our theories in use are stored in our brains is different from where our spouse theories are stored. This is what we were implicitly talking about earlier. So theories in use are the rules that algorithms say that actually determine how we behave. And our spouse theories are the ways we would like to behave. And these things are often in contradiction, okay? So when you get people to write down what they actually said, it activates that part of the brain where your algorithm is actually stored. That's why I don't care if they try to lie, because they can't help but to betray themselves, right? They can't help but to display the normal tactics in these conversations. So I kind of looked at it. Of course, I asked, to what degree does this accurately portray how the conversation went down? She said, more or less, like really close. Okay, great. I said, so all that great stuff you said, hardly any of it's in this conversation. And she thought, I said, do you see that? She's like, yeah, I do see that. So you're making yourself more dismissible by making a weaker argument. She's like, yeah, I do see that. And then I said, so why do you do it? She says, well, as a woman, I'm afraid of coming across as being too direct. And also, as a lawyer, my job is to advise and counsel, not to direct. I said, that's fine, but your job is to give them access to your full thinking so they can decide for themselves what's in their best interest, right? She goes, yeah. So I said, so what's interesting, what happens, you can imagine, if she doesn't realize that she has diluted the argument, and that's the reason she feels dismissed, then she has to find some other explanation. And I don't blame her for landing on the gender explanation. Now, it doesn't mean the gender explanation isn't also true. It could be.
Right, of course.
But you're not coming this clinically clean, right? Because you're part of the problem in ways you don't realize. And it's understandable why you're not being more clear, because you're worried about being dismissed. So the very thing you do to prevent yourself from being dismissed ensures you get dismissed.
Right.
And so her concern is, okay, but then how do I do it so that I'm not off-putting, And by the way, it always triggers this. You ever see Between Two Ferns, which is Zach Galifianakis?
Yeah, you should be off-putting. I thought that as soon as you said it.
Are you kidding me? Isn't it the best thing?
Like, you should be off-putting.
Who was the actress?
Because I wanted to be,
Well, yeah, we're trying to be serious and professional. Who was the actor?
It was
the actress.
Jennifer Gardner.
Jennifer Gardner, yeah.
Jennifer, what was it? Is it from the Hunger Games?
From Silverline's playbook in the Hunger Games. Jennifer, we're Lawrence. Two idiots right here. Jennifer Lawrence, right?
Yeah.
So that's right. So that we should tell the audience that you guys should see this with Jennifer Lawrence, and it's just the greatest thing.
And
great. She says, and he says to her, something like, and he's a little bit overweight, right? And that's part of his shtick. And he says to her something like, some of those comments are off-putting. She said, you should be off-putting. It's just a beautiful moment. So I understand her concern, right? Okay, now she's going to step up and she's going to get back in there now. And she's going to share the really good thinking and reasoning in her head and give access to it. So you asked about principles. So I want to talk about principles and techniques. So first of all, she's, again, not see this conversation as like a competition of who's going to be right and wrong. You got to get rid of that. My job is the only reason I'm sharing with them all of this, in this case, is so they can decide for themselves what's true and what they want to do about it. And whatever they decide, as long as they've really looked at the potential reality of the circumstance, even if I disagree with it, I'll get behind it.
Right.
So then it doesn't even feel like it could be a conflict for you, or maybe a lot less so, right? But then what do you actually do in the conversation so you are living into that mindset or just acting according to that kind of mindset? And so a great little technique that works, and again, you can't do it as a technique. It has to be on behalf of the values you're trying to live according to in the conversation. Just a little 3-step thing. It's like, here's what I think. Here's why I think it. And then just ask them what they think about what you just said. So say, listen, guys. And then if you need to couch it at all, then a bit, fine. It's like, guys, listen, I know I'm revisiting this conversation with you. We've had it before, but I feel the need to do so because I haven't really laid out the full picture for you. And so whatever you guys ultimately decide, I will get behind you, but I don't want you to make a decision yet until I give you full access to what my real concerns are. And here's what they are. Blah. I go, but let me stop here. What do you think about what I just said? Or what's your reaction? Or do you think I'm overblowing it? So you're making the conversation a collaborative search for the truth. I got my version of it, but let's talk about it. And that 3-step, here's what I think, here's why, what do you think? I have people coming back to me from 20 years ago. Well, what'd you learn? What stands out for you? The stupid 3 steps. I go, we were with each other for 6 months. No, 3 steps. I'm like, great. But it seems really, this little thing seems really wonderful and really helps people hold on to their reasoning selves. Go ahead. Yeah, please. Sorry.
No, I think, because I love this. And I think that it is so important to basically everybody, because it's the fundamentals of good communication, right? Or effective communication anyway. And I think what I'm kind of curious on your take of this idea of going into it with the goal and the guiding principle of the collaborative search for the truth. If in this particular example of the lady who's already had this poor discussion, you're advising on how to go back and give it with the right,
I wouldn't say it's poor. I was just like, it was like so-so.
It was so-so,
but not strong enough.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
It wasn't effective, right? She didn't get the outcome that she thought she should have with her argument. And so you advise her this, and I'm kind of curious in this focus of the pursuit of collaborative truth. Is that not, is it just like wouldn't it, well, let me ask, is it a good idea to start off the conversation, or it's going to be, maybe what you're going to say might be difficult to hear, it might be inflammatory, or it might be, contrary to their thinking. And I don't want to say couching it, because I don't think that's the right word here, but really kind of prefacing what you're about to say with, look, in her example, I'm you've hired me for, all of my faculties and perspective. What I'm doing here is trying to give you all of that. And in this, search for, this goal of collectively finding the truth. So I'll give you everything that I've got, so that you can then take that from and give me all that you've gotten. Together, we're going to get hopefully something that's far better than either of us maybe could have come up with, right? And then you go into, and so here's what I think. And so now they're already, or is it like, wait, you can't really start a conversation like that because it comes off, I don't know, stupid, or it's already off-putting.
I'm of 2 minds about it. I'm with you. I'm kind of feeling a little divided about it. First of all, like the way you just framed it, first of all, it's about framing the conversation, right? Because the whole thing is, before you express the truth of what you think, it's important to frame the conversation, kind of maybe where you're coming from, what your intent is. I think that's important. Most conversations start with no frames whatsoever. People just start talking, so it's like, why are we here? What are we talking about? Why is it worth talking about? Nobody knows, but let's just keep talking. And a lot of my clients, they go for meeting after meeting after meeting, and nobody really establishes like, okay, here's what we want to talk about, and here's why it's worth talking about. So that's advice for everybody. Like, if it's your meeting, please do that. If you don't, please ask. Because everybody goes along with this, and like nobody's like, not nobody, but oftentimes people aren't fully like connected and engaged because that hasn't been made clear. So I think there's definitely a place for that, but please don't do it every time, because people are going to want to kill you, and you're going to want to kill yourself. I had a friend who, he kind of learned this methodology, and then, sometimes you hate when people use what you taught them back at you.
Back at you.
He's like, so Todd, listen, I'm going to tell you what I think. I'm going to tell you why, then I'm going to ask you what you think. I'm like, no shit. Can we just get to it, please? We could have had the conversation. I could actually finish. I could have done my thesis at the time this preamble occurred. Like my father used to say, he's going, let me ask you. He goes, can I ask you a question? I go, you just did.
You just did. Yeah.
How about just ask the question? So just like, because sometimes then this stuff becomes like too gimmicky.
Yeah,
because
totally.
It has to exude from your being. Yeah. And when people get used to you, being this way, then you don't have to do it.
Yeah.
But I think like maybe like the more hot it is, or the more unusual it is, Or when you start to get larger groups of people that you're trying to do with this, then I think you really need to pay attention to the framing.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
You
that was
know,
a really great question you asked.
this is fascinating. I think we could do this for 3 days straight. I think
Oh,
this would
look at it.
be,
Wow.
I know time has flown. This is really cool. And it just makes me think of how cool it would be to, have you come into an organization and kind of do this with them and whatever that might be. So I can only imagine having kind of this already, this just like, what do we have, like 45, 50 minutes of this really interesting concept, talk about one little idea. We started chipping away at the tip of the iceberg on one little
Yeah.
concept. So I can only imagine
Yeah.
how profound and fantastic that would be for an organization. So as excited as I am about that, I think that, likely poor little Cyberlinks is way too small. But let me ask you, what is the ideal kind of perfect client, for your firm? What's the sweet spot where, if somebody's listening to this and they're like, hey, oh, we fit that. Oh crap, awesome. Or oh yeah, we're too small or we're too big. Who do you guys work with? Who's the ideal client? Yeah, take me through that.
I mean, I have who we work with, but I don't know what the answer is. I should know the answer. My marketing team will be criticizing me later, I'm sure, for not giving a good answer to this question. Like, you can't even answer a straightforward question like, who is your ideal client? I'll explain why in a second. I mean, who we work with, like I said, I think, I don't know if did I say it was in
You
our
did
kind
the
of
pharmaceutical
introductory call or at the
companies.
beginning of
Yep.
this. Well, not just, I mean,
And
big
biotech.
companies across, we do a lot of that, but a lot of non-farmers too. I mean, banks, financial institutions, big like real estate companies and builders. Um, we've worked across many industries. When we do work with smaller companies, so the big companies cut across industries.
Yep.
IT companies like IBM, for example, they're an up and coming company. They may make it
Yeah.
any day now. We'll see
Yeah,
how
we'll
it
see. I mean,
goes.
it's the jury's still out. They keep flip-flopping on what they're doing. So it's like, once they figure out exactly where they want to be in life, maybe they'll get somewhere.
Yeah, get
Yeah.
back to us.
Get back. Yeah, totally.
It's an interesting startup. Let's see if they get their funding.
Yeah.
Um,
It's funny because it's
mm,
true in a way.
and yes, I know, and I work
Yeah.
there, and
Uh-huh.
it was
Exactly.
a fabulous organization. I was lucky
Yes.
to have worked there,
No,
even
they're
consulted
amazing.
to consulting firms. When we do work with smaller companies, it has been like early stage biotechs.
Mhm.
That's where we've done
Oh,
stuff.
cool.
I mean, work with Red Bull North America, which was super cool. It was amazing. So, but the reason I hesitate to answer the question is because so we come in often through the kind of HR door,
Mm.
right? And you have people who have different HR subspecies roles like leadership, learning, talent, training, these kinds of things, right? And some of those people wouldn't be happy being called HR people. And for those of you who are insulted by what I said, I am sorry. I know how you feel. As a person who was training in OD, I never thought of myself as an HR person, but I've just given up. Fine. But sometimes we're hired not explicitly to develop people, and that tends to be the function leader because they're interested in solving a business problem,
Right.
right? And we still do the same thing with them because a big part of the reason why they're not making as much progress on the business problem that they're frustrated by, or a key part of the solution to achieving their business objectives, is ensuring the relevant people are having the right conversation with each other in the right way. And so, like when a C-suite executive say comes to me and says, and this is not how we promote ourselves, and we're not a strategy firm, right? But it says, we can't align around a strategy at this high level. It's because they're not talking to each other properly. And they're not talking to each other in a way that's surfacing the real issues. And that's creating an agreement on what the core problems and opportunities are, and then therefore a clear view on what we need to do to seize those opportunities. It seems to always come back to candor being compromised in some way because they've never developed the capabilities, and they're dealing with something that is complex and threatening and or embarrassing, right, for people. And people, so they're doing complex phenomena that's like, and there's going to be conflict in the conversation. And whenever those two things happen, doesn't matter how important it is, you get a group of people, doesn't matter how smart they are, doesn't matter how moral they are, how genuine and sincere their desire to do good in the world is, this overprotective program kicks in and messes with people hard, and they don't realize it, and then they blame each other for it. You know what I mean? And so, but, IBM had a great saying, that now I worked with them back in the early 2000s. The saying was, as long as we could solve any problem, as long as we can get together the right people in the room and can talk about it.
Yeah.
And I believe that, man. I just want to turn it, and what we've done is we turn it into a skill set that's learnable, and you can immediately apply to whatever business problem that you need to talk about with each other.
Yeah. Well, and I think that the problem with so many of those organizations is it becomes their culture. And part of it is because they lack those skills that you go in and train them with, it becomes the culture, and people kind of give up, or that's just how it is. It's a little argumentative, it's a little combative, and or whatever it might be. And it might be because there is one, particular person who's, leading the organization. I see it time and time again where it's all starting from there. And if only they had the skills, but now it permeates other parts of the company. And now it's a cultural thing that as you go in, their problem is more than just now communication, but and I guess the culture will change when you teach them these new skills, assuming they're open to it. And I'm assuming that's why they hired you to come in and do that. So I just think it's fascinating. I'd love to see how that plays out in a company as you go in, and how like kind of like a 6-month look back to see, an after action review of, hey, how did this affect the company 6 months later? Where are we?
We have these stories. I mean, a lot of clients that hire us, I would say, they have a problem with being too nice.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have the rare people who they're just too aggressive with each other. Okay. And sometimes these two things go hand in hand, because you're too nice, right? And then you flip because nothing's getting done.
Yep.
So a public story I'll tell you quick here is we did a lot of work with a well-known telecommunications company outside of the US called BT, British Telecom.
Mm-hmm.
My team and I trained, 5,000 people there. And then we were hired specifically by this business called OpenReach. And by the way, I'm telling the story because they told the story. They told the story to a group of the FTSE 100, unbeknownst to me. And then I'm getting all these phone calls, and I'm living in London for 3.5 years, which was great. I just wish I would have known about it, but fantastic. And the Brits aren't people who typically brag, but they're proud about the work we did together. And it was certainly like a huge collaborative effort. It's not like you just came in, we saved the day and went away. Not like that at all. We were with this group of people for 2 years, and these were OpenReach of the guys and gals who go up the poles and down into the holes to fix the faults in the telecommunications infrastructure. The whole country runs upon this stuff.
Yeah.
At the time, you had 35,000 engineers. They'd spent tens of millions of pounds across the space of a few years, and they could not improve workforce productivity. They were still doing the same number of lame jobs, 2 jobs a day, or whatever, 2.5 or something like that. Somebody had the bright idea that, their managers probably know what they're doing that's preventing their productivity, what they need to do instead. Can we just get them to talk about it? And then we had been doing work at some other part of BT with good results. And they're like, okay, we want you to run your honest conversations program. So we took 2,800 managers through it. We trained up 90 coaches, their peers, to keep holding them accountable, to apply the methodology and to keep developing them. By the way, we cut through those 2,800 people in 3 months, maybe 4 months. But the initiative went on for 2 years. The concern was, oh my God, they're going to start being honest with people. This is going to go horribly. Union agreements is going to go up. Sick absence is going to go up, employee engagement's going to plummet. You can understand because some people had been real assholes with their honesty before, and it created real problems. So it's not like,
The toxic honesty.
and you have a country that's, colonize half of the world, they may have a slight aggression problem, as do we. So you have some reason to be a little afraid, right? So we came in and we did this thing, and I have to say, I have to give credit to the HR group there and to the master coaches that we trained. They were amazing people who took this so seriously and dedicated themselves to it. And it was some of the, I don't know, one of the greatest experiences of my life, even to do this work with them, to be shoulder to shoulder with them, to try to figure out how do you bring out the best from these people, these 35,000 people, because we know they could do better. And fast forward 2 years later, the CFO got an investment and efficiency team that measured the whole thing. They claimed across the 35,000 people, something like an 8.92% sustainable improvement in productivity, earning them a cost savings of what was in the US a dollar equivalent at the time, $120 million from leadership development, unheard of, right?
Nice.
And even better, we didn't say it. We weren't even involved in the measurement. And then also sick absences went down, union grievances went down, and engagement on their engagement survey, like every measure except one, went up significantly. And it was just kind of an amazing thing. And then the people who are the master coaches, they, there's BTS, this great diaspora, they go to other companies. And like I've met them before, kind of just bumped into each other or have reached out to me, and they still say, yeah, this is one of the most profound experiences of my entire career.
That's awesome.
So this is what's possible when you turn speaking the truth into a competence.
I love that. Well, now, so obviously you can't work with every company in the world. They simply lack the manpower, but you are writing a book. Yeah.
But we do train the trainers as well. We train up people to internal people to do it, and again, 13-person global faculty and growing. But yeah, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, and that's fantastic. That's a great point. But you are writing a book, yeah? What are you thinking in terms of when that might come out? Not to put
next year,
put
about 12 months from now. So what is it? June 14th, 2024, 2:17 p.m. Eastern time. That's the hope, because there's a lot of books on conversations out there. Radical candor, difficult conversations, courageous conversations, insert conversations, blah blah. And some of the thinking in those books are very good. Some of those things I hope nobody can figure out how to implement because it's just going to make things worse. Honestly, nobody, other than my colleagues and I, have geeked out on the subject to try to figure out what actually works and what doesn't in the real world.
Yeah.
Exactly. Not in some consultants or, professors' ivory tower.
Well, I think that's where the real value is. I think for, as a reader, and is those authors who aren't just like, the self-help guy who's never really done anything, but from those people who are in the trenches, who've been geeking out on it for decades. And they're like, I've read all the books. I've done we've put this in practice. And obviously we cannot, we can't be at every company and teach other. Here's the book. And maybe they can, get some training, but if nothing else, hopefully they can get these ideas, the 3 takeaways, the whatever it is that really kind of makes an impact in their business. So I think that's phenomenal.
And that's what I'm hoping to do with the book. Because honestly, I, even though I've been doing this for 30 years, I probably wasn't psychologically read a book on it, but maybe I didn't even know enough yet to write a book. I've probably known enough for the last 10 years to write a book. But I just, so the idea was I want them to be able to take away things that are really actionable from this book, not just to be inspired, and they can use it. But also, this is the limitations of human beings, right? So what's kind of really interesting is when you look at well over 30,000 documented conversations that didn't produce the results that people wanted, using that tool I described to you earlier, or they share with you conversations they'd like to have and how they would have them that they're predicting won't produce the results that they want. That's a lot of data. So what you see in this data there's only about a handful, we'll call it two handfuls of traps that people fall into that are seemingly universal, regardless of company, country, and culture. That's interesting. Think about data coding.
Mm-hmm.
And then what good looks like is also very predictable. There are things you should do that work, and there are things you should that don't work. And all of that language is analyzable. So if you figure out the coding scheme of what not to do and the coding scheme of what to do, then we have her. And the goal is to make, because I think the essence of good leadership is your ability to figure out what's true with other people together, and then therefore figure out what to do about it. I don't care if you're trying to influence somebody in a matrix organization or up the chain, or you're having a feedback and coaching conversation with somebody in your team. What are these things other than conversations between human beings where they need to talk about the real issues and figure out what to do about it? It's just that we're bad at all of that, right? That's why we have different programs. We have Leading Beyond Boundaries. We have Leading Up. We have feedback and coaching. We have high performing teams. It's fundamentally still the same thing that we're teaching people with some nuances. So what I'm trying to develop is something that will be disruptive to the whole industry, right? I hope. The $60 billion industry worldwide, okay? Wow. Leadership training, corporate leadership training. Effect on organizational effectiveness, 0 or negligible, according to all the people that know what the hell they're talking about. And people in there, if you listen to Michael Beer from Harvard Business School, he'll tell you the reason that is, like this famous change guru guy, he's probably retired by now, says, well, because people revert back to their old ways soon after these programs are over. Yep. So we have a way of developing people that ensure that doesn't happen, but I'm going to teach her how to do it. So what I want to do for people that will be affordable, right? Because only the 0.1% get what we do.
Yeah.
Because these companies essentially are rich compared to like the rest of the world.
That's right. Oh, super rich.
So bring to her any conversation you want to have with anyone about anything important, where there's something at stake, and then you're not sure you're up for it. Like you want to have it, but you're not sure it's going to go well. Well, you know what? She's going to talk you through it. And you're going to strategize, but then she's going to recreate the conversation with you. She's going to play the person you're going to talk to. And then, so she's going to recreate the situation you're going to be in. And then as you're talking, if you fall into some trap, she's going to correct it for you in the flow of this real play. Super. And then to help you correct it with better practice. Catch and correct, catch and correct, catch and correct. And what that'll do for you is, first of all, you'll feel like really set up for success in the conversation. You'll feel a lot more confident. That's right. But she's also training you to have this conversation and disrupting the aspects of your algorithm that are ineffective and helping you shore those up. That's with awesome. More effective aspects. And then the practice makes it part of you. And the more and more you use it, the better and better you'll become. And at some point, maybe you won't need her at all, but she'll be there for you 24/7 for any conversation you want to have. That's what I'm working on, because I think we may be at this point where the AI and the natural language processing can do it. You just have to train her properly.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
Love that. That is a fantastic idea.
And if your audience, like, we always kind of put some like free resources aside. So if anybody like wants to get some stuff for free, first of all, they just have a special little email that my team monitors. They just put Todd Holzman candor @gmail.com. So it's TODDHOLZ, or Z for my friends in the UK, MAN candor without the U, please, CANDOR. @gmail.com. But they could also hop on my website, holzman.com or holzmanleadership.com. We got a whole blog. We got videos that people can watch. You don't have to like put in a stupid email to get them. Just watch them and enjoy them. And we're on LinkedIn, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 times a week. And now faculty's chiming in, and we're just trying to put out things that could be valuable, whether people end up working with us or not.
That is fantastic. Well, we will link all of that below in the the video and online everything so people can get to it.
And the off-putting from Zach Galifianakis.
And that is definitely going in there because it's hysterical. And yeah, I love that we both got that immediately as soon as we said it, and that you brought it up. You must have seen it on my face.
No, but we were both thinking, could we say this?
I love that you did.
And I couldn't resist.
That was fantastic. Well, Todd, it has been so great having you on the show.
Thank you, man.
I'd love to reserve the right to bring you back on when you've got your book or when you've got your app going, or potentially on another subject, moving forward, because this has been absolutely fantastic. Thanks again for coming on, and I look forward to having you on again.
All right, man. Thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.